Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Tech Strong Women, where we feature amazing women doing amazing things in tech. I'm Jodi Ashley, executive producer here at Tech Strong, and I'm here with my co-host Tracy Ragan, creator and CEO of Deploy Hub. Before I introduce our guest today, I just want to remind you all that you should be tuning in 5 days a week now to Tech.Strong.W. We have so much great content every day of the week now, so be sure and get out there and check it out. Also, make sure you're checking our TechStrongEvents.com site on a regular basis. We have tons of great virtual events happening. We're always looking for speakers and sponsors. So be sure and tune in and go to that site, TechStrongEvents.com. Hey, Tracy, what's on your mind today?
All right, I'm first going to tell a story about something that happened to me in the past and then reference it to a story that just recently happened. Back in the day, Dr. Dobbs used to have an annual conference, and I would attend it, oftentimes alone. And one of these conferences, I decided to be brave enough to go to their night event, which I always didn't because most of these conferences were mostly men. I walk into this event to find about 10 nurses, young girls dressed in really short nurse outfits, really revealing nurse outfits. And when I walked into the room, they all ran to me. They realized that they were in this horrible experience of this show with nothing but men on the floor, and they were the only women. So that evening, I spent my evening with 10 young nurses. And we played all the games, and we played Guitar Hero, and we just had a great time. And they were all horrified in the experience that they were having. And I was horrified by it, but we made the best of it. And I hoped that we would never see anything like that again. Okay, let's fast forward almost, probably 15 years. And Palo Alto Network decides to dress up 2 women in black evening gowns that are revealing and put lampshades on their head as an entrance to one of their events. Come on, people. We are way beyond this. And if you wonder why women don't like to go to these types of events, if you want to prevent women from being in technology, then do that. Do exactly that. And I think that, women today, we have to talk about this, and it has to stop. Please stop. It's not okay. That's what I have to say today.
Now, I just can't even believe that I was an event planner for corporate meetings for years, 5,000, 6,000 people. The fact that no one on that team walked up and said, "What the hell? This is just move them away." All they had to do was take their hands and walk them out of the room. And the fact that that didn't happen and I've had the same experience, Tracy, as an event planner 10, 15, 20 years ago. I would literally put my hotel room off in some corner. I'd have them hide me so that no one knew where my room was, because I'd get drunken patrons knocking on my door otherwise, or calling my room at night. And it was horrible. And, just when we think maybe things are getting better, this is what we get to see all over LinkedIn and everywhere else. I was appalled. I'm still appalled. I'm still processing how gross that was. But we have a great show for you today. We have an amazing guest, Katherine Druckman, and I'm going to let her introduce herself to all of you. Katherine, take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I am Katherine Druckman. I am an open source evangelist at Intel. By night, I don't know. I used to have a better at night story, but maybe I'm just I occasionally do some hobby podcasts as well, and other things. I'm an aspiring open source superhero, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, that's what I do. I've been around the open source tech world for quite a long time, and I've always had that kind of open source bias. So if you hear me say that phrase a lot, that's probably why, because I don't. It's all kind of all I know. So for better or worse. But yeah, I appreciate you having me. There's so much to talk about today, it seems like.
There is. What are your thoughts on Palo Alto Networks?
Oh, I mean, I would like to say that I'm shocked, but I'm not because, and I think this is a larger conversation, right? Because I think the tide is turning and not in our favor. I think there's a lot of unfortunate pushback against diversity, which seems mind-blowing, given all the work that's been done, I think, to advance inclusion in tech. But so I wanted to actually bring up a thing that I read just yesterday, and that was coming from a notice from Anita B, who puts on the Grace Hopper celebration, and they're really struggling. And I thought, well, this is an indication of something that's not good. And I think it's I think larger organizations, as we're experiencing financial challenges and churn and things, I think funding for a lot of diversity initiatives is suffering. And I can't help but think these things are related. When I see both of these things, yesterday I saw the public announcement that Anita B is having to restructure a bit, and then I see this Palo Alto thing. They kind of I draw connections in my mind, and that's a little scary and unsettling, isn't it?
I think it's very unsettling, Katherine. I really, really think it's very unsettling. But as we all are going to be saying, we will not go back. We will not go back. I've heard discussions about diversity and inclusion. And by the way, we usually have really technical discussions, and we'll get back to that. But I think this is important. I think all women are feeling it, and there's no reason why we shouldn't talk about it. But I've heard about diversity and inclusion with this idea of diminishing someone because you're pursuing diversity and inclusion in a panel discussion. And you're diminishing who is being diminished in this process. I guess you could say if you have a panel of 4 people that you're submitting for a show and you have to include a woman, you're diminishing men by 25%. But if you really want to know what diminishes somebody, look at the pictures from Palo Alto Networks.
Yes. Or calling somebody a token just because you're forced to.
Well, and I do this day in and day out, you guys. We're not diminishing anybody. We're working a little harder because there's so few of us. I have to work harder to find those women. It doesn't mean I'm diminishing anyone else that's there. And it's not just women. It's diverse men. It's not just a panel of 4 white dudes. Let's face it, right? And it just irritates me. I got in a conversation with somebody about this the other day. It was like, well, we run this women's organization and we don't ever talk about it. And I'm like, well, then you're part of the problem, because you can't just ignore the problem and think it's going to go away by not having a conversation as an organization. And we went back and forth, and I said, okay, agree to disagree. I said, you can do both things. They're not mutually exclusive. But this is what I do day in and day out. I find people, I reach out, I get people to participate. And our company is, as Tracy knows, just diversity is top of mind. And we are run by all men, but they all agree that we have more than 3 men on a panel, then we need diversity. Whether it's somebody of color, whether it's a woman, we need diversity. And we try and stay true to that. Now, granted, sometimes the customers choose those panels and we don't have a say, and we do the best we can to encourage them. But there's only so much we can do. But we try really, really, really hard. But I don't think it diminishes anybody.
It does not. And in fact, diversity is what brings diversity of thought. And that's really what we're trying to achieve. Diversity of thought, more opinions, more access to windows for how other people think and how other people do things is really critical. And let's get us back to this open source topic, because I know, this is Katherine's kind of wheelhouse.
Absolutely.
We struggle in the open source community to have women contributors.
It's always been that way, yeah.
It's always been that way. And, Katherine, let's talk about that for a minute. How do you think, what is it that we need to do to get more people that look like you and I into this open source community? What are we missing? What are we not doing? I think about it all the time.
I mean, there are so many things. So when I started my in my life in the open source world, it was the numbers were always something like, well, in tech in general, there's about 20% representation from women, right? But in open source, it's maybe 2. I worked for remember back when magazines were a thing? I worked for a Linux journal for many years, and it was always this kind of strange irony that the people running it were women, but the audience was again 96% male. And so, it's always something that's been on my mind. And then, but as a technologist, I got my start in the Drupal community. And the Drupal community, for example, always prided itself on being a little bit better than the overall open source community. So at one point, it was, yay, we have 10%, and 10% of us are women. 10% of the contributors are women. And it was maybe 20. And so I try to kind of look to that as an example of what really did work. And I think that community early on was far more proactive about discouraging just hostile communication. And again, for those of us who have been around, we've seen some things, right? We've seen some really weirdly hostile behavior. We've seen women targeted when they participate in online forums, and if a community comes together and has zero tolerance for that, I think it's that's the first step. But generally, how do you get people even to the table to cross that kind of threshold to being a part of a community is really tough. You have to be, you need mentorship. You need people you need almost one-on-one mentorship. And that's tough, especially in, when things are as they are now, when people have so little bandwidth.
And anytime I'm in the Continuous Delivery Foundation, I have to, say that they have been a great organization that has been pretty diverse. There have been a lot of women who have been on board positions, on technical positions. And it's such an interesting experience to be in an open source organization that has achieved some level of equality between, as men and women and diverse men and women. And our conversations are amazing. Other open source communities, I've had one of my worst experiences at a conference I've ever had happened in April at the Open Source Summit. I walked into a room of we were going to be talking about metrics and metadata is basically what I said I wanted to chat about. And I left feeling so degraded and so spun around that I went back to my team and said, I'm going to my room. I felt like I wanted to vomit, to be quite honest. I was treated so poorly, literally treated with so much disregard. And it made me really question everything about me that I just had to pull myself together in order to finish the conference. It made me think, do I ever want to go to a conference again? And I'm like, God, these are the thoughts that women have when they have these experiences. And how do we, I should have I feel like I contributed because I just didn't tell them all how I felt. And I didn't know how to do that. How do you do that? How do you just say, hey, you guys are really, this is not right what you're doing to me right now. I should have said that. And in a way, I feel like I participate in the problem by not standing up for myself. And if another woman had been in the room, I may have stood up for myself.
Yeah, but it sucks that none of the men there were an ally either. Because they have a responsibility. Mitch, Alan, either one of them would have stepped in and went, hey, wait. This is, they would have smoothly participated in a way to let everybody else know that they were out of line. And we need more men to do that. We're outnumbered again. So we need, we say about our LGBTQ plus community that we need to be their allies. We need to step up. It's the same thing here. It's no different. When somebody's in a room and you can tell that crap's happening, somebody needs to be their ally, no matter whether they're a man or a woman or they're gay or straight or whatever. We need to be willing to, but it's hard, Tracy. I'm like, I get fired up and then I say stuff I shouldn't. You're much more even keeled than I am. I'd be like,
I just try to defend myself as much as possible. And I was curious at the whole time why I had to. But,
Right.
I remind people on this show that we had the woman from Manpower, and I should remember her name, but she talked about
The woman from Manpower. Sorry.
hilarious, right?
I think we laughed about that at the time.
Yes. She talked about the impact COVID had on women in this industry in particular, and how it was really hard for women after 4 years or 3 years of being out of the workforce to get back in, because things had changed so drastically in tech, even in technology. And women tend not to, it's hard for them to go on a 3-year hiatus and then start applying for work. In particular, how resume matching is done through AI now.
Ugh.
So she talked about the problem of that and how it is biased in the sense that some of these, these job seeking tools, they don't take into account that there was a 3-year gap of COVID where women were sitting at home being teachers because they had to be. There's challenges all over the place, and somehow we have to get it sorted out. And Katherine, in your work, you've been a really great advocate for diversity and inclusion with the Open SSF. And for everybody who doesn't know, Katherine and I are co-chairs of the marketing committee and the DevRel committee. What do we need to tell ladies to get them involved, especially in the DevRel committee? Because you don't have to be a member of the Open SSF if you want to start dirty outreach for open source security.
So I always think about this in terms of what would I have told younger me, because it took me a long time before I worked up the courage to contribute to an open source project. Many years, because I thought that was for somebody else. You have to be a real engineer. Like, I don't know what that means, but what's the real? We're all faking it. Like, let's be honest. But not really. Anyway, there is a level of courage that I think that we need to encourage other women to have, and that is, don't assume that other people know more than you, because they probably just don't. They may be just saying it more confidently. So there's that. But really, it's getting women to have to kind of let go of some of the baggage. And again, I'm kind of talking to myself here, but let go of a little bit of the baggage and just, grab the microphone, grab the CFP, do the conference talk proposal. You might be surprised at what gets accepted and what doesn't. I think we tend to have a lot of kind of negative self-talk, and that it comes from the environments that you just highlighted, right? We've maybe had a bad experience or two at a conference. We've had a bad experience or two in a forum online, in a Slack channel, in any kind of community. But for whatever reason, and I don't necessarily know what it is, but women tend to step back a little bit more. And I think as I've internalized things like Sheryl Sandberg's message about, don't step back from the table until you absolutely have to, right? That I remember that being a message going around years ago. There's that, but there's also the kind of message about how men will tend to apply for a job if they only tick 50% of the boxes, whereas women tend to only apply for a job if they think they meet 90%. I swear, the second I started saying, you know what, if men can do it, so can I swear my life improved. And I know that seems silly, but it's true. You kind of have to absorb the fact that you have something to contribute as much as anybody else, no matter where you are in your career, wherever whatever your skills may be. And you kind of have to just take the leap of faith. So that's what I would have, if I could go back in time and tell myself that's what I would tell myself. And I think that applies to probably other people as well.
So did you have somebody in your life as a young person or a child that helped you build confidence, that allowed you to think that way?
I was an only child and an only grandchild for a while. And I think I do have the slight advantage that I grew up with people telling me that I was the smartest person in the room. does build confidence, whether it's true or not. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I did. I like to think that I was raised by some very tough women, so I'm pretty resilient and I have a pretty thick skin, and I'm willing to kind of go in there and beat my head against a wall if necessary. But I think I also experienced the same insecurity that everybody else does, and that is you feel like you have to achieve something before you can, again, going back to the submitting conference talks topic, you have to feel like you have ticked all of these boxes before you can start putting yourself out there and giving talks on whatever topic interests you. And that's just not true. It's just not true.
I would hope that, more of these conferences, I feel like one of the check boxes when submitting to conferences should be, have you ever presented before? Right? So
It is usually, I think. I feel like I get asked that a
some
lot.
of them I do, some of them don't. Most of them will say, have you presented this topic?
Yes, there you go.
Have you ever presented before is a different topic altogether. Because oftentimes people who have never presented, they don't have a recording to share. So they are prevented from presenting. At the Ortelius Project, twice a year, every 6 months, we do some kind of online event. Now, we may not have a whole lot of people show up, but it provides us a lot of content and it provides a structure for new presenters. And we encourage women to be involved so that they can have that content, so they can have that experience. Because sometimes it's impossible to get that experience at KubeCon. It's really hard to get in to do it.
Well, yeah.
It's getting harder. I could, everybody, Katherine is going to be presenting at the Grace Hopper conference.
That is true.
I'm
pretty excited about that
many times. So I feel like maybe what we need to be doing to improve this, and this is for any new presenter, is create more ways to present, so you can start learning to do it, learning to submit abstracts. Or maybe that's something we should talk about in the DevRel committee at the Open SSF.
Yeah, absolutely.
University outreach is where to do it, right? If we get more women thinking that they can present at these conferences. One of my finest achievements, I feel like, we had a young contributor for Ortelius, and she presented at one of our talks. And I encouraged her to present for DevOps World. And during COVID, when we were doing online events, and she's from India, she was accepted to do a talk at DevOps World based on the talk she had done for Ortelius. And I am so proud of that, because we allowed her to have that platform. We've got to figure that out, I think, generally in the DevRel community.
Yeah, it really does help to have that a safer environment, an encouraging environment, so somewhere where you can get constructive feedback on your talks. All of that kind of stuff will lead to the outcomes that we want to see, which is, I would like to see, when I go to a tech conference, open source or not, I would like to see 50% of the presenters as women. Like I would like to see 50% women. And I don't remember the last time if I've ever seen that, except at events that were specifically geared to women.
No, I think that maybe at most 15 or 20%, at very most. I don't know what Linux Foundation strives for, but it's way too low.
Yeah, there are a lot of us in the world. Like, what? Where are we?
I ask that all the time. Where are the women? I feel like I need to stand up on my roof and scream out, "Where are you, technology women?"
Yeah, but only your horses would hear you.
Exactly.
You need to be in like New York City for that really to have an impact.
No kidding.
You live out in the middle of nowhere land.
So the other topic I think is interesting is women writing blogs. Now, Katherine, you've been great at building the blog program at the Open SSF. Why don't we talk a little bit about how much easier it would be to submit blogs than even a talk? But the thing about it is, if you get a blog submitted, you could actually build a talk from the blog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I always, advocate if you're gonna take the time to do the research and put and create some content, use it in in as many formats as you can. I think that's a great idea. But yeah, I thank you for saying that. I don't know. I don't know. It's tough to. Oh gosh, aspiring writers, again, I spent many years at a magazine. It's tough to, again, work up the courage to, just like, submitting a conference talk. It's tough to internalize your own personal value in terms of what you might have to contribute in the form of a technical blog or article. But all of that said, it is a really great way to, you don't have to stand up in front of an audience. You don't have to, you don't have to put yourself out there in quite the same way. And I think it is a really good way to start kind of testing the waters on sharing content and building your own kind of reputation. And even it's a really great way to test out ideas, right? From a technology perspective. If you're kind of working through, I don't know, anything from a proof of concept to something that you're struggling with technically, it's such a great way to get feedback on your ideas. Again, if you can find a constructive environment to do it. But yeah, in the past, it's so funny. Like, I don't want to get too sidetracked on this, but I could go down quite a long rabbit hole about the ways the web has changed from, 20, 30, how long has the web been around? Anyway, from let's say 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. We used to have this very interactive world where the web was made up of distributed sites. Everybody had their own personal blog. And remember when we had things like blog rolls where you would link to other people's content? But now it's totally different, right? We share content in silos. Like it's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's maybe it's Mastodon or Instagram, or we're kind of tied into these platforms, and it's a little bit less I don't know, collaborative, I think, than it used to be. You used to be able to, in the olden days, hash out technical problems in the comments section of an article. I don't see a lot of that happening anymore, but I would like to.
Wow, I forgot about that.
Yeah, right. Remember in the good old days when you had meaningful interactions and comments, when it wasn't just trolling. It's amazing.
Yeah,
The days of yore.
That's a really good point that you make there, because blogs become, as you point out, they're more siloed. So what are the characteristics for our listeners? What are the characteristics? If you've never written a blog before, you never submitted a blog to any kind of organization, then by the way, you can submit blogs to the OpenSSF. You go to openssf.org, Ortelius. It's an open source project. We accept blogs, ortelius.io. What's the characteristics of a good blog? How many words? What kind of content?
So I have fairly strong feelings about, I think people, especially today, people don't want to read a very, very long article, not online. If it's much more than, I don't know, 1,500 to 2,000 words, I think that there's some people want to read it or they used to want to read it in more of like a book form, an EPUB, actual printed material. Wouldn't that be cool? Do we still do that anymore? I don't know. But yeah, I think, you keep things pretty short and to the point. If you have more to say, write a series. That's my recommendation. I think in terms of structure for technical content, the most popular stuff is just sharing how to do a thing, whatever that thing is. We all work in this, well, not we all, but a lot of us work in the technology field, right? And we're in our day-to-day lives, we face and tackle technical problems, big and small. And even the smallest problem, once you've solved it, you can help solve it for somebody else, right? So if you've solved, if you've written a bash script that was really helpful, write a blog post about it, put it out there and say, hey, this is what I did. This was the problem I solved, and share how other people might be able to use it. And again, going back to the ideal world in which we're interactive, maybe you even get feedback. You get feedback on how to improve it. But if you can turn it into more than just, a Stack Overflow post, but an actual, narrative, I think, that's a great place to start, because at the end of the day, a lot of people consuming technical content are just trying to get through their day. They're trying to close tickets. They're trying to solve issues. They're trying to get rid of the technical roadblocks to creating whatever it is that they're working on. And so those kind of people are out there searching for the answers. And it's nice to have something that's really well articulated instead of just right. We all rely on Stack Overflow from time to time, but to find a really nicely written blog post that outlines how to solve a problem is such a value. And if you can share that with other people, then you're on your way to kind of building your reputation, I think.
I think it's a really good recommendation for women because part of the problem is we need more women making an effort to brand themselves. I hate to use that term, but that's really what it is. It's a matter of getting your name out, getting people to know who you are, and starting by creating blogs is a really good way to do it. One of the ways, as you point out, is what your experience was. So we're all learning new things. There's a lot to learn in security. There's a lot to learn in AI. And one way you can do it is to take on one of the open source projects, for example, and try to implement the tool and talk about your experience, what you learned, what you liked, what you think should be improved. And that will, of course, get you in a doorway for being part of an open source community. So there's roads to get more women into these projects, and blogging is one way to do it. Blogging about an open source tool is a really good way to do it, and then potentially using that information to submit a talk where one of these open source tools might be highlighted, like at an open source summit or at any of like a FinOS or any of these conferences that are related to open source projects. And, I think the Linux Foundation generally tries to do a good job of bringing diversity in. We just got to get them up from, I think it's 20% to that goal of 50.
Yeah. And a lot of that is again, the outreach and getting people, once you're on the other side of, let's say, a call for proposals process, a CFP process, there's nothing you can do about it at that point, right? When you're just evaluating, you have what you have. You have the submissions that you got. So you have to really start earlier to make sure that, and this is a thing I think that lots of communities struggle with. And if we had all the answers, we could solve them tomorrow. But I think we're collectively working through trying to solve these problems. And I don't know. That's why I love this format, by the way, podcasts and this kind of thing, because really at the end of the day, I think a lot of us we all have problems, right? Whether we're engineers or whether we're in marketing and DevRel or whether we're the CEO of a company, we run into problems every single day. And if we can share what those problems are, here's how we're working to fix them. But hey, do the rest of you have any ideas? Because we would love to hear them. And that's the great thing about this forum and this media format is that we can say, hey, listeners, these are the problems we're facing. If you have any ideas, please reach out to Tracy. Please reach out to me, right? Because, this is how we solve the problem.
The sad part about all this is women used to dominate technology, computer science. My mother was she was a hospital, basically. She ran the files. She was worried about, intake files. She ran the chart room, they called it. And IBM walked in and said, we need somebody who would be a good analyst for automating this. And they picked her and said, you know more about the chart room than anybody else. And so she spent I'd say the last 7 years of her career being an analyst for IBM and how to build hospital chart rooms, electronic versions of it. Now, if we even go back farther than that, think about movies like Hidden Figures. I went to a conference once that were talking about women in tech and the journey that we've taken and how we lost our position was right around the 80s. And she was very thorough about this. And she showed ads in like Vogue magazine where there were, women sitting at computers with these awesome shoes. But that was where they were, right? They were sitting in front. They were not key punch machines. They were sitting in front of old time big computers because women were the computers, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's where the term came from. They were doing math. They were computing. Yeah. So we've lost I think that women started, and the basis of this talk was that women started losing their position in technology right around the 80s when, PCs were starting to be available at home, and men would buy these PCs for boys, right? And the boys started playing on them, but they weren't buying them for little girls. So this is when the separation started, was around and then we had things like movies like Weird Science, talk about a terrible movie for women, right?
Yeah. Yes. That's interesting. I have some other thoughts though, too, in terms of like material culture transformation, right? When as objects evolve culturally, I think that their audience tends to change as well. And I think there's something happens also where originally computers, again, were people, but then computers as objects became equivalent to an administrative tool, right? The things that might be useful to quote unquote women's work, like a typewriter, right? You might use a computer of sorts to do that kind of file work or whatever it is that was diminished in some way. And then as computers became something a lot more mainstream and a lot more powerful and a lot more pervasive in society, then I think that's kind of how we lost it. I think, I have a weird background in sort of the history of objects, but you think that things in our culture, like I'm thinking of random things like a friend of mine did a master's thesis on how glasses went from medical devices to fashion, right? Things change. And I think you can say the same about computers. Computers went from administrative tools to being, pervasive in our society, to running everything that we do, right? So I don't know, interesting.
Well, and like when I was growing up, probably you too, Tracy, we had typing class because we didn't have computers until
yeah, exactly,
when I was like graduating from high school. They had the Trash 80. I worked in an
I had one to her. Right, well,
that was the first thing I ever learned to type on was a Radio Shack computer. But typing class was all girls. Home economics was all girls, and the boys took shop. In tech, you didn't ever see girls taking those. It was like no one encouraged any cross pollination. It didn't occur to the people in charge that, there were probably plenty of boys who would have liked to take home ec, but they wouldn't, right? Because that wasn't cool.
Yeah.
But that's back in I won't date myself, but it was a long time ago. And I don't know, we've had this conversation like with coding and getting girls to code, and like my granddaughter, my husband taught her basic coding and she was in middle school and she just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And there's a lot of girls that are interested in that. And it's just fundamentally, we don't still have an educational system that says our little girls should be encouraged on computers and tech and science just as much as our boys are, which is just still not happening. I have 2 grandkids that are one's just started high school and one's oh God, is he a junior or a senior? I don't know. I don't want to know. And, it's still, I just even see it with them. They're not encouraging girls in the technical side of things. It's frustrating. And I don't know, how are we in the year 2024 and we're still not getting it?
And I feel in many ways in the last 5 or 6 years, we've gone so backwards. As we started out this conversation, we are not moving forward. And somehow we have to say we are not going back. And we're going to bring more women into this industry. And we have to be the ones to mentor and to encourage. And, today's discussion was all about that. And Katherine, thank you so much for those awesome tips on blogging, how to get things submitted, because the more we see, the only way we're going to get 50% is if we get women to try. And that's the best thing to do, is to encourage them to try. Right.
Yeah.
So we always have this one thing on this show. I always ask for a book recommendation.
I knew it was coming.
Yeah. So before it gets, and I always do this on a surprise. I don't tell you ahead of time. It's okay if you don't read, you're not into books. But if there is a book that you think that we should be reading, what would that be?
Oh, wow. Well, this is totally random, but I was looking up an author. I read a book by a guy named Grant McCracken. And I read the book 20 years ago, and I think he wrote it in like the 80s or 90s. And I think it was called like Culture of Consumption. And this is totally random, but I want to read that book again. So I'm just going to put it out there. Look up Grant McCracken. It's a Canadian anthropologist. and he's written quite a few books. I remember that one being really a good one. Totally not tech related, but interesting about the way that we interact with the, objects in our culture.
Ideas are objects now.
Well, yeah, exactly. So I'm trying. That's why I want to reread this book and kind of
Yep.
integrate
1990,
it to a completely
culture
different.
and consumption.
Yeah,
And he did a follow-up to it in 2005 called
Yeah,
Culture and Consumption 2.
there you go. See, I want to read these
That-
again.
Wow,
never
1990
read
to 2005. That's a
Yeah.
nice heap later.
Yeah, and he's written quite a few other books, and I kind of want to read them and try and see how those might apply to my current life and see how I look at the things around me a little bit differently.
Awesome. Well, this was really fun, ladies. It was super entertaining. We had a really good start. It was different, and I like it. So I'm excited.
It actually felt good.
It did really feel
after
Cathartic a little bit, yeah, and just get all that.
And Tracy knows I make stuff. I like do logos and mugs and all sorts of arts and craftsy things. I think there's some we're not going back t-shirts and in our
Well,
future.
perhaps lampshades. I don't know. Maybe.
No.
Take it back. Take control. Do lampshade hats, lampshade handbags. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, if some people have their way, they're going to be red and they're not going to just be a lampshade. So let's just think about that. Yeah. Just
Boy.
say, Handmaid's Tale, anyone? So thank you so much for being here today. It was great to have you. Tracy was like, we have to get Katherine on our show. So I'm really glad that we did that. And I'm excited for all the fun stuff that you're working on and what's coming up. So keep us posted, and thanks again for popping on our show. Trace, you got anything to add?
No, just if you're a woman out there and you'd like to get more involved, go to the Open SSF. There should be a page out there under how to get involved for the DevRel community. Katherine and I, you can find us there. We are working on building that DevRel community. So if this is an area of interest and you'd like to learn more about how to do it, we're there. We're there to mentor you. So please join us.
Yeah. And if you can't find us there, find us somewhere else. We're everywhere.
Everywhere. Look on Tech.Strong TV, people. Well, thanks to everybody for joining us for another episode of Tech.Strong Women. We are so glad that you came. We hope you enjoyed our conversation, and we hope you'll tune in for more episodes. Thanks to everybody. Have a great day.